Alright, boys, welcome. We are now back on the stream to watch the dev stream. So let's see what they have for us on the American server. I'm pretty sure we've seen everything except for the Object 435.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Warzone official stream and the preview of the upcoming updates La Royale. My name is Mike Boom, and I am joined here by lovely Tom, aka Oxy, who is going to, together with me, present all the new content. Well, not all the new content, keep in mind, we do still have some surprises that we're going to be leaving for the dev servers and for the update itself, but we're going to be showing you some of the new content in this update, including but not limited to high drag bombs, new radio commands that you can use to order your team to actually help you out a little bit more. New visual effects for missile trails, cables on towers. We have new voice acting for tank crews, similar to the update we had to the ship crews not too long ago. A new naval map, a new tank map, and I do want to remind you before we go ahead, please keep in mind everything you see on this stream is work in progress, so don't take all the stats and the battle ratings at face value. Those are and can still change until the update itself. So, shall we start and begin? Let's begin with America and the new M1KVT Premium Tank. KVT stands for Krasnovian Variant Tank. This is essentially a visual model, a visual modification for the regular M1 Abrams, the one with a 105mm cannon, which is supposed to make it look like a Soviet tank to be used in OPFOR missions and training missions in real life. Now, I do want to mention the real M1KVT was based on the M1A1 with the 120mm cannon, but for gameplay balance, and since this is the premium, we decided to make it an M1 with 105mm cannon. It doesn't really change much in terms of design itself, it's just a visual model. And in fact, if you don't want to actually have your tank look like this, you are entirely free to uninstall the visual model, which will make you a little bit lighter, and you don't really lose anything, because all those little ERA blocks that you see on the tank are non-functional. This is entirely a visual modification. None of these things actually add any tangible armor. You have, of course, a little bit of structural components here at the front and on the barrels in the back, but they're not really going to be saving you from any incoming fire. This is purely for funsies. Keep in mind also, these barrels in the rear do actually affect your gun elevation. So let's quickly check this out in a test drive.
This is...
So it may actually be very, very good, very useful for you if you don't install the Vismod. Then again, let's be fair, NATO tanks in general can't really aim backwards anyway, because
so it's not too much of a problem.
It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but, you know, it's a nice little visual modification and one you can get in the upcoming update. I just like to look at this thing.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's like I really like premiums like this. They don't really lock anything from what you could get in the regular tree. It's still very functional. It's like visually different. It's a really good version of the Abrams because it's incredibly quick. Reload as well. You can play very aggressively, very reliably. It's great, yeah.
The early Abrams are a lot faster because they have less armor on them, so less weight to weigh them down, which is very good. And I really like the camo editing on this barrel as well.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a good one. It can dodge top tier as well, being 10-3, so that's another nice advantage for it.
Alright, let's move on to something a little bit more interesting for the World War II fans out there.
Dude, I've been waiting for this. Look at this. It's a cross tank. I've wanted a cross tank for a while. I love this. This is the M4 T26, which essentially is literally just what it looks like. Sherman hull with Pershing turret. Not really too much else to say about it, other because obviously you know what both of these things are. It's not stabilized, unfortunately, so it's still standard for the Pershing. But it's pretty interesting. It's a nice addition. 6.0 is a little bit more viable now. You can play it with the Bulldog and the two M36s. And hull down, like, the mantlet of the Pershing, well, the turret of the Pershing rather, is deceptively good. And you can really make use of a lot of areas of the map with it because it is still fairly tall, the Sherman. Hull very weak, so out of cover it's not that great, but it is on the later hulls, so you do get the more powerful engine. And for 6.0 it's pretty nice. I've been really hoping to see a vehicle like this.
Does it get a really nice APHE shell?
It does, yeah, so it's the standard shell types for the Pershing, basically. So if you know what the Sherman is and what the Pershing is, it's literally this, put them together, basically. Nothing too complicated about it, it's just another tank that you can have in your lineup, and it's pretty good.
So
The 90 is amazing gun, really good gun. Shame about no stabilizer, but you can still make good use of the turret armor at 6.0, and it's going to be a nice vehicle, really. I like it.
Why do they have?
Does it remind me a little bit of the M6 with the big turret head?
Yeah, it does. It's got the same energy, I think. But yeah, it's a nice one. Big fan.
Right. Next, of course, you have already seen the dev block for the new Tomcat making its way into the game, the F14B. This is an upgraded version with more powerful and more efficient engines, as you can see by my fuel consumption on the left-hand side, as well as access to some fancy new stuff, like a targeting camera in the nose, which you can use to find and detect both air and ground targets. What I have equipped right now are the new high drag bombs as well, which I'm going to be showcasing. And you also have access to AIM-9Ls as well as a new Phoenix missile, the AIM-54C variant with a digital seeker head, which should be a lot better at tracking enemies. Now, let's give a quick try to these high drag bombs. I'm going to use my gun camera to select the target. Let's go for... why don't we drop all of them at once?
Yes. Let's go.
Introduce a bit of speed.
These are weirdly satisfying to use. Found.
Ignore the bombs. There we go. So, why high drag bombs? Why the drag shoots? Essentially, in War Thunder, you had a bit of a tendency to blow yourself up if you tried to go for low altitude bombing operations. You could, of course, circumvent that somewhat if you put a timer on your bombs. That is an option that you have already in the game. But it was always a little bit unreliable, perhaps. Maybe by the time that the enemy sees the bomb lying on the ground, he may have time to run away. You can still get caught in the blast radius. Sometimes it phases a bit through the ground. It's not ideal. However, with the drag shoot bombs, what you essentially have is... once I drop this, you can drop bombs precisely on a target, but with the added parachute, they slow down, allowing you to get outside of the blast radius, which is very useful when you're trying to do low altitude bombing like that. I wouldn't recommend using this particular bomb type at high altitudes, just because the drag chute is always open, which means that the higher you go, the longer it takes for the bomb to come to the ground.
Yeah.
Although there is a tactical maybe advantage here that you could do, which is fly high, drop a bomb over a capture point, and then in 5 minutes maybe it gets there and may catch some people by surprise.
Do the bombs make the same whistling noise, actually? I don't know. So that could be quite fun, actually.
Maybe. That's something we could try out later, or, well, once the patch goes live. Let's quickly go over the armament options of the F14. Now, you have some added options for your air combat. The previous F14 did not have all aspect IR missiles. This version does, with the A9L, as well as the option of mounting additional countermeasures, kind of like you can find on the Harrier GR7, for example, which should make you last a lot longer in air combat, given or assuming that you are good with your countermeasures. You also have access to the new AIM-54C, which provides a bit of better tracking, so you should be able to use this more effectively at longer ranges. And you also have access to the AIM-7M for closer range radar missile action. Of course, you have regular bombs. You also have paveways, finally some guided bombs for the Americans in the tech tree, which you can use together with this new pod, the Lantern targeting pod, which enhances the capabilities that you already have with the base F-14B with the tracking camera by also adding a night vision mode, a thermal night vision searching image that you can use to more effectively find the ground targets and then engage them with these laser-guided bombs. Overall, it's a very nice upgrade to the F-14. It also has some stronger engines, and of course, as I mentioned, a bit more efficient, so you should be able to go faster, go further, engage for a longer time, have more endurance, and kill people more effectively. Very nice. Okay. Let's move on to the BF2C1.
Yeah, the exact opposite end of the tree, really. This is the new reserve. You're probably semi-familiar with it. China do have this vehicle as a premium, the Hawk 3. Effectively another modification of it. It's nice. For the longest time, the pea shooter's always been a reserve, and despite being quite like an interesting early aircraft, it's not the most beginner-friendly because its maneuverability is fairly poor. And so adding this to replace them, I believe the M2 version is still a reserve, and the later two will remain in the tree, but they won't be reserve aircraft anymore, I think, anyway. But yeah, it's nice. It's not the most maneuverable aircraft in terms of the biplanes that are available from testing it from the Hawk 3. The landing gear also take a very obnoxiously long time to deploy. But yeah, it's a nice change, I think, for like easing new players into the experience. It's definitely a more forgiving and better introduction to aircraft for America. Obviously, America's quite a popular nation, so it makes sense. It's a good addition. Got more bombs, more bomb drops for tanks as well, so flying battles, you can use it there. Yeah, it's a bit more usable than the pea shooter, a bit more forgiving. It kind of fills its role of being a reserve aircraft very well, I think.
The only thing I'm slightly disappointed by is that it doesn't get the 50 cals.
Yeah.
So you can't quite as effectively use it in ground army.
It's a bit of a shame. Like the 7.92 62 Brownings are probably my least favorite machine gun, I think, for aircraft. So yeah, firepower is never going to be that great. But still, it is better than the other pea shooters, and you do have the other pea shooter with the 50 cal you want it there still. So it's good to have it in the game, I think, in any case.
Alright, let's move on to Germany. Getting this, the Raketenautomat. It automates Raketens. You may notice something a little bit familiar here. This is essentially the same weapon system as on the USH 405 that you can find in the Swedish tree on a wheeled chassis, but now in the German tree on a chassis similar to the one on the Jagdpanzer 45, the mechanical chassis, which sadly does at least currently have less engine power, so it is not quite as fast as the Jagdpanzer 45. You can't zip around quite as much, but it is also quite light. Now, that is a bit of an issue. The frontal armor is very weak, so I would very heavily recommend not to run into enemy IFVs or even 50 cals, can probably go through this quite easily. But if you are familiar with the USH 405, you know that this weapon system is quite nice. What you have here is a twin-barrel rocket launcher with automatic loading, which means you can rapidly fire off very high penetration rockets that go relatively far, relatively fast, and have a very good penetration as well for the battle rating. These things can be quite nasty, although they sometimes don't tend to have too much endurance because once your rockets are out, you need to reload for quite a long time. However, for ambushes and surprising heavy tanks from the front, this thing is very nice.
It does have more ammo than the Swedish version as well, which is another, like, that really did hurt that one actually in its potential, but this one a little bit more. Still very nice, and yeah, the rapid fire nature of it can be pretty fun to use. The rockets are quite blinding as well, so even if you don't quite land your first one, you usually panic you're fighting if you're close enough. It's got a lot of advantages. Yeah, it's just a nice, little interesting vehicle to add for sure.
It's going to be interesting how this will play in comparison to the USH. Because it is tracked, it should be a bit faster on rough terrain, and it can of course turn better in close quarter city engagements, for example, but at the same time it's not quite as fast, so you're going to have a harder time to get into ambush positions.
Yeah, it's different, like it has drawbacks and advantages comparatively, so it's a nice addition. Definitely a cool one to have in the game. The off-center turret will forever bother me though.
Don't look at it. Don't notice it. It's fine.
Trying.
Alright, next up we have another World War II tank.
Look! Another small man's. You like to see. I really like vehicles like this. So this is very similar functionally to the 38T. Armor's not quite as good. The F50 on the front is 25 or 30. Yeah, 30. 25 on the side. So similar functionally, but this is a tier 2. So it's a tank that Germany have in tier 2. It's not the Puma that has scouting, which is really nice. Not the most survivable. It is more mobile though. I'll take it into a brief test drive. Something else actually I really like about this gun in particular, despite being fast as well, so it is a bit more mobile in all respects. So as a light tank, it's pretty good. Also has the shoulder stabilizer, which is really, really good as well if you're being aggressive. Something about this round though, the stock one here, is that it's one of the only tank rounds that doesn't have a tracer. So if you're being stealthy and flanking, you are not going to be as easily identifiable if you're being quite, well, stealthy and aggressive like that. So it's pretty good. It's not the most penetrating, like a 3-3, you will struggle to use this gun effectively in various situations, but I really like that advantage of the tracerless shell. It's pretty unique, and it's a nice one.
I'm also noticing something interesting. Those sound like different crew voices.
They do. How about that?
So if you are a naval player, you may have noticed an update we did a few patches ago, I think last patch or last 2 patches, where we updated the way that the naval crew voices work. Essentially you have much more reactive voice acting, and you can in fact hear the situation, the tenseness of the situation based on the voice of the crew. So if you're getting engaged, for example, your crew is very, very, very nervous, very, very stressed out, whereas if you're just chilling out, spotting some people driving around, they're much more calm. And we're now implementing the system to tank crew voice lines as well, which should make the whole experience a lot more immersive.
Very nice.
You can also hear different when you are outside the tank. You hear the voices a bit muffled because your crew is inside the tank. But when you, for example, go into the gun view and see if you can hit a tank,
I could try to hit a tank.
doesn't always work, but trust me, it is there. And it should be quite nice overall.
Let me knock it out, maybe they'll say something. I don't know, I can't hear. I hope they are.
The Germans are very, very enthusiastic about destroying things.
Yeah.
Weird.
Something else quite nice as well is that several of the smaller nations, I think, have their own specifics. So I think Finland has their own, and Australia and South Africa have like a commander with the voice as well, which is quite cool. I like that.
So these voices are unique for each nation as well. Very nice. Alright, next up we have a upgrade for the East German attacker fans, the Su-22M4. This will take the tech spot after the Su-22UM3K, a East German variant which has access to an extra gun, more powerful engines, more flares, all aspect R60 MK missiles, and of course also the new parachute bombs. In this case, the 5500SH. This should be a nice little upgrade to CAS for Germany. They tend to be a bit, you know, underwhelming at top tiers. Don't really have the fancy technology that F-14s or Harrier 7s have. But with some guided missiles, some rocket pods, you have a lot of options for generic CAS use. And since you do also have access to up to 6 R60 MK missiles, you can also do some damage in RRB. Although keep in mind the Su-22 isn't exactly a fighter and not the most maneuverable aircraft out there. But I have to say though, fast aircraft with a lot of flares have their own little niche in RRB. They can run away from enemies and essentially deplete them of missiles before they get shot down themselves, which is a very, very useful trait to have, especially when you are a, well, what most people would consider an XP Piñata, a free kill in a big and heavy interceptor, a CAS attacker as this is. Okay, and next up, let's see what we have. We have the Russians, starting off with one that I've been waiting for a long time. I'm so happy.
Yeah, it's very... Look at it. Look at the mans.
Got to less answered my prayers. We finally have the BTR in the game. This is the BTR 80A. It is quite a little bit rating, and that is very much intended so because it doesn't really have anything else that is canon. you'll see it doesn't have APFS, yes, the maximum penetration is only 65 millimeters, and you don't have ATGMs either, which means this vehicle is quite limited in terms of offensive capabilities against enemy tanks.
So
Think of it like the BMP, given that the cannon is basically the same cannon as on the BMP, but on a wheeled chassis which can go much faster in a straight line and on paved roads. So imagine swing flanking around on maps like Cargo Port, for example, should be quite nice there. The gun is not stabilized as well, so you do keep that in mind if you're trying to engage people at longer ranges, but thanks to the high elevation you can engage enemy low-flying aircrafts. This is essentially in playstyle in War Thunder. Imagine an R3 T20, but with with no stabilizer and a much larger profile. That's what I'm very happy to finally see the BTRs.
Yeah, it's nice to have it. It's
Why are
like
people
it's strange though. Like it,
39? Is it
I don't know. Like I'm not sure how well it's gonna do because the lack of pen, like the fire rate's not immense. Like it's not as devastating as the R3, but it has the mobility to get into positions quite early on and just be very annoying. It's also, because it's a light tank, it's a very good segue for CAS at that BR, because before this they really just had like the PT and the ASU, I guess, very loosely. So this is a pretty nice addition to have there, but it's strange to me that it only has 3 crew. Obviously it makes sense, it has 3 crew, but you expect a vehicle like this to have a lot more.
It would be a troop carrier, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a lot of negative space in the middle. So I guess it's going to be very fragile. But yeah, it's like a good little segue if you like your aircraft, so it's going to be good for that.
And since it is a light tank at rank 4, it also gets scouting, which should help you out with getting your cast a little bit easier. Alright, this is not the only vehicle that Russians are getting on the ground. We also have a new prototype tank.
Another tiny boy. This is deceptively small, actually. If you look at the X-ray, like that guy is standing up, and that's the floor, so it's a very small vehicle, actually. It's interesting, it's like a tiny T-62. It's got the same gun, same rounds, I believe. It should be the same, yeah. So you're familiar with the firing platform. Armor is not really that reliable at 8.3. You can, if you angle slightly, you can do some like strange stuff with these plates. Like there's the potential to bounce stuff. In down tiers, like you will be bouncing some stuff, I would say probably, but it's still not that reliable. You do have the reverse gear as well. It's not very impressive, but you do have a KPBT, which is amazing. I love this gun. Against light tanks, aircraft, it's really, really effective. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a tiny little vehicle. You can be quite aggressive with it. But tiny vehicles that have very poor gun depression are usually a bit difficult because you need to crest hills further and then your gun doesn't work too well. But on some maps, it's going to be nice. It's a nice alternative. And it's I like vehicles from this era, sort of the tail end when the kind of meta shifts to more like technology, like mobility, thermals, and that kind of thing. I like these kind of vehicles. It's a nice vehicle to have. It's familiar. But
I gotta say, that hull looks very funky from the front. It reminds a bit of the IS-3 with the pike nose.
yeah, like, it's strange, and I think I can't work out really how effective it's going to be. I think if you're fighting some of the earlier rounds, it's going to be like pretty good. So it is stabilized. So it can still be pretty quick on the reaction times, and angle it, there's some potential there. So it's a nice little a different vehicle to take in place of the other MBTs that you have. I like it. Cool vehicle.
And next up we have, for many people probably the star of this update, the SU-25T and its expert version, the SU-39, both coming into the game in this upcoming update. Now, these are going to be very complicated to explain because, well, I mean, look at all that. This is quite possibly the most technically complicated aircraft in the game, given that you have all these different ordnance options ranging from normal bombs, parachute bombs, fire bombs, you got rockets, you got rocket pods, you got guided missiles, you got guided TV bombs, you have Vickers missiles, which you may find on the K-15 and K-52, a whole 16 of them, and of course it can be used both against ground targets and air targets. It also has a little something called IRCM, which is essentially the system you can find on the Mi-24, something that is intended to make it harder, if not impossible, for IR missiles without countermeasures to lock onto the rear of this aircraft. And for good measure, you also have a new air-to-ground radar pod, which can be used to find, track and lock onto enemy tanks. Now, one thing that I want to mention on this ground radar, it shouldn't work against stationary targets. It will mostly only work against moving targets, which is of course a good indication that they are alive. Otherwise, it will also be able to lock onto dead targets. Now, we're going to do a proper and full fly out of this later on if you have some time at the end of the stream to show you all the different weapon systems. But for now, let's do a quick showcase of the new ground map. So, Tom, I will ask you to bring something with some IR missiles.
Very well.
So we can check out the IRCM systems and hopefully also check out the ground radar.
I just like the camo. That's I'm quite simple.
It does look very, very nice, I do have to admit, yes.
Reminds me of a little shark. I'm a big fan of that.
Alright, Tom, I have invited you to the session. So yeah, new ground map as well, the Iberian Castle, which you're going to be seeing shortly, although only from a perspective from the air. This is going to be a new tank map for you to explore on the upcoming update as well. There are some village areas, there is a fort area on the side as well. So it should have plenty of engagement opportunities for all kinds of tankers out there. There are some wide open fields on the outskirts as well. I can show you quickly the overview here.
I like the little Pac-Man in the corner.
There we go. All right. So let's take out my Su-39. I'm going to bring out the Vickers, some rocket pods, as well as the ground radar. And we're going to see if we can get some of the AI tanks that are flying about, or rather rolling about. And Tom is going to try and show you what it looks like trying to lock on and fire an IR missile from the back. Now keep in mind, this IRCM system should not work against Stinger missiles. Those have an integrated countermeasure system to defeat exactly this kind of system, but regular AIM-9s specifically and R60s and all kind of air-to-air launched IR missile which does not have the countermeasures will be affected. This does not mean that the aircraft is completely invulnerable, that is not the case, but it should be a bit more tough to crack. Okay, so let's switch over to... This should be the radar, see if we can find any targets. Don't think I do right now. We can also, of course, zoom in. Right now, without the other targeting pod, I do not have access to a night vision. This is the internal camera that you can use on the Su-25. And of course, you can also fire the missiles just as you wish. These are identical to the ones found on the K-50, so they have an airburst mode, they have high penetration heat, and they can be used against tanks and aircraft at the same time. Okay, Tom, let's see if you can lock on. So that is what it does. It essentially makes it a lot harder for our missiles to be able to track you.
Insane.
It's kind of crusty.
But if you get closer, it should still be working.
It should, yeah. We've tested it a little bit.
I'm buying this.
Sometimes it's a little crusty and inconsistent, but if you are close enough,
I'm buying this.
it does still connect.
Oh my god.
Essentially what it does is it massively reduces the distance at which IR missiles can be effectively used against the new Su-25s. But it does not make it entirely invulnerable. Okay, we're gonna check out all the other weapon systems later on in a match or in a custom battle. For now, let's move on to the next vehicle. We have the new Russian ship, the Bravey.
We do.
Bravi.
Yeah, Brave, I think it is. English. Interesting, it's part of the PR 56 series. We've got quite a few ships in game of the same series. They're all like slightly unique, they've got their own differences. Main point in this one though are these two at the back here, the little missiles, and they're pretty good. At the moment, I'll show you briefly in the test drive sale, I guess. Their proxy is a little bit off for aircraft, but you can still use them against ships, although they are a little bit... They don't like being fired so low. Sometimes if you fire them quite low down, they can splat into the ocean, but usually they're pretty okay. They're not quite as easy as I think like the old, especially the Italian missiles were to just aim right in. Like these they get a bit wobbly sometimes, but can still be used against ships. Yeah, against aircraft right now, that's what they're intended for, but the proxy is a little bit weird. I think that's obviously going to be fixed. But it's an interesting little ship. Functionally still very similar to the other series, but yeah, it's a nice little addition on the back to have this versatile little launching system.
Speaking of missiles, you may have noticed some new effects, both when Tom launched the air missiles earlier, now, and maybe later on we can also show off a tow missile. We have some new flame effects, some new smoke effects to missiles to make it look a bit more appealing. And for tow missiles, we've also added the cables, which I will quickly attempt to show off whilst Tom loads the next vehicle. So if you check out the Bradley, for example, the tow missiles, as you know, are wire guided. They are not RC guided, they're not laser guided. Previously, we did not have the presence of the wires, but now we do. Which can be a bit of a double-edged sword. It looks nicer. Oh, sorry. Okay, wrong screen. There we go. It looks a little bit nicer, but it may also reveal your position more easily to the enemy team. That is something that you have to keep in mind with this kind of ATGM.
Yeah, like, they do fly differently as well. They have a dip when they fire. And from experiencing it, they seem like a little bit harder to flick. Like they're less like kind of jerky. But they are more stable at long range, which is kind of what they're intended for anyway, at least for engagement ranges of War Thunder. So yeah, they're a little bit less easy to like cheese, which sort of makes sense, because before you could like flick them behind corners and stuff. It's a little harder now. Also, I believe if you aim the pointer too far away from the initial point you launched from, they fail to track anymore. So fire and then slam it down, they will just keep going.
Oh, careful.
So they are a little bit less kind of gamey to use. Yeah, they feel a bit more stable at long range. My experience.
All right. Next up, we have what is that?
Another tiny mans. Look at all these tiny mans.
That's so weird.
It does. So this is the earliest Sark armored car, the smallest one. It's interesting. I don't know if it would get hugely good. It's only got 5 degrees of gun depression, which is a bit of a shame. Comparing it with the Daimler, it's similar.
I won't use that.
It's lighter, has a more powerful engine, but the gun depression is a bit of a shame. It's also, of course, like very, very weak. Only 3 crew, very, very, very fragile. But it's nice little low-tier vehicle to have. Standard 40mm, 2-pounder stuff. And it just, like, from the back, I don't know, it just looks kind of cool. It looks like a little Jeep to me. Of course, these vehicles now, they do have a localized commander crew for the tanks. I don't believe all of the crew members, it's just the commander right now when I tested it. Yeah, it's a nice little tank. Something else to sort of bridge the line into Tier 1, which is...
And if you like wheeled vehicles like this, you'll be happy to know that Japan also gets a new wheeled vehicle. Kind of. This is the Type 87 RCV prototype. We already have the Tech Tree Type 87 RCV with the 25mm cannon in the Tech Tree at a substantially higher battle rating because it gets APFSDS. This is essentially the same chassis, but with the RH202 20mm autocannon, which you can find, for example, as a turret gun on the Leopard 2K. Which also means you have way less penetration. DM43 with 57mm of penetration, no APFSDS, no ATGMs, but scouting on a relatively compact and fast chassis, which you can use to zoom around in at bat rating 5.7, currently again work in progress, but this is going to be a substantially lower bat rating version of the Type 87 RCV, given that it has massively reduced weapons capabilities as well. That said, I really like the way this thing looks. It looks so
chibi.
compact. Yeah, it's very nice.
Very squishy. Like it. Yeah, it's nice. Little addition there.
Next up, we have the new battleship for the Japanese.
I'll briefly show you, Issei. It's I don't know really too much about bigger ships. I like destroyers and that kind of thing. Yeah, currently this comes after. Can have a look. Hyuga. Similar, like a lot of these ships feel quite similar. I've not had too much experience with them, so I can't really go into too many particulars. But yeah, it's sort of similar. All the guns, you know, standard gun array, same. Not quite as much anti-air as Fuso, but I can briefly show you armor layouts and that kind of thing, so we can move on to more applicable stuff, I guess. But still a very pretty ship. I love how these ships look. The Japanese battleships are one of the most visually appealing, like vehicle designs I think I've seen in anything. I've always really liked them. Yeah. Nice new ship. Very highly detailed, of course, all these big ships are. Hopefully nice too. Also, the H1S early, I believe, has been replaced with the 1E. And I will show you as well, I believe, as all of these series of helicopters now have a model cockpit, which looks really nice. I like how boxy it is. Don't know, I like square things. Yeah, it's just nice to have more helicopter cockpits, I think. Not really too much to say about it. I mean, you know what this helicopter is and what it can do. Yeah, the new cockpit looks great.
Alright, so let's move on to China, getting a new top jet, the J8F. This will be following after the previous J8 in the tech tree. I can show you real quick after J8B at a whole batch version higher, given that it has the following upgrades: stronger engines, more advanced weapons. This does now get access to the PL8 all-aspect missile. This is roughly equivalent to the A9L in terms of performance, and you can carry up to 4 of them. But you also have the option of taking out the new PL11 radar missile. These are equivalent to the AIM-7 Sparrow, some of the later ones. Not quite the top ones, but it should be quite nice for engagements. Now the J8F has, of course, a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of, in comparison to other top tier jets, in that it only has 4 missiles, and you don't have any of the guided weaponry for ground striking capabilities, unless you count, well, the parachute bombs aren't exactly guided. Well, it should be a decent option for people who may not have the F-16 or may not want to go for the F-16. They can take out China's new top tier jets. I can also quickly show you the engines that are slightly more powerful, so roughly 7,000 kilograms of force on the afterburner compared to the previous J8Bs, roughly 6,200 kilograms of afterburner. So a total of around 1,500 extra kilogram force on both engines combined, which should propel you a little faster at higher speeds and greater accelerations. Okay, we also have some tanks for China.
We do. I'll start by showing you the ZTZ-88B, which actually came before the A. They're very similar, these two. Visually, they're almost identical. The main change is the gun. The B uses I believe it's an analog of the L7, so it doesn't get the proxy HE round. And because the barrel, I can sort of show it at a better angle, is slightly smaller, shorter rather, it doesn't have quite as much penetration on the dart shell. It's a little bit weaker when compared to the later version, but apart from that, they're very similar. Currently comes before the A version, and yeah, makes a already strong lineup even stronger. We also have the Object 211. Like, I didn't even know this existed. I had no idea about this one. It's kind of nice. The muzzle brake is really cool, actually. It uses the 85. It's the standard later one that they have. It has the A round and the it's called the D on the other gun. I'm not sure. Still decently powerful. I always prefer the A round on this gun. It's going to be a nice little light tank for the mid-tiers. It's folded with the PT currently, comes before the PT. I've never been too keen on these light tanks though, because the turret traverse, this is on A screw and it's only 10 degrees, so it's very slow. Pretty big, pretty weak, lots of space to hit, with the turret being so sort of far in the middle, like you can peek corners and get hit very easily, like it's very fragile, but gun's got a decent amount of killing power, so it's nice. It's not that dominant. These vehicles will always struggle to be that impressive overall, but it's still a pretty competent tank. Like, the gun's nice, mobility's nice. It's just very fragile, so you need to be a bit careful when playing it. Gun depression as well will limit where you can play, but still nice to have. Very unique vehicle to give China. I like it. Pretty cool.
Are you a fan of the Tornado? Let's be fair, many of you probably are not, because the versions that we have in the game aren't exactly fighters. So we have chosen to fix that for the Italians. Introducing the Tornado ADV, the ultimate fighter version of the Tornado. Big asterisk, it's probably still not going to be quite as good as stuff like the MiG-29 and F-16. But you now have a Tornado that can kinda turn. It also has access to 4 A9Ls and 4 Skyflash Super Temp radar missiles. You are not going to be wanting 4 missiles. With a total of 8, this thing can do a lot of damage if left alone. The radar should be quite good as well. It feels a little bit more maneuverable. It has stronger engines than the previous Tornado in the Italian tech tree, and it also has a bunch of flares, over 300 countermeasures in total, which will help a lot with sustaining your fights. You can bring some drop tanks, and you can engage enemy aircraft quite effectively. Now keep in mind, of course, this is still a tornado, don't expect it to be the best dogfighter in the world, but if you always wanted to fulfill the dream of becoming an ace in the tornado, with the previous ones you couldn't really do that, either due to lack of maneuverability or lack of missiles. With this version now, you can indeed make that work. Now sadly, in terms of other weaponry, you don't really have anything. This is the dedicated fighter version, so you don't actually have currently any kind of ground ordnance at all. But the missiles on this thing are very, very potent. And I like this kind of aircraft. I've always been a fan of the late F-104s because they are underrated, given that they are not really that good of an aircraft chassis. But the late ones have very, very, very good missiles for the tier. This is in a similar vein. And it should actually be able to outturn F-104, finally.
Yeah, it's nice. I like these kind of underdog vehicles in the meta. They always feel more satisfying when you do well with them. Yeah, it's a nice little one for Italy to get. Absolutely.
And
Now, with the Swedish Sherman coming out, I do plan on making a video on it.
It will be put up to the G91YS in the tech tree.
For that.
Now Italy is not only getting this for top tier, there's also something else that Italy is actually getting kind of first, not really. We already saw similar technology on the QN506 event vehicle for the Chinese, but we have a much better version now in this tech tree for Italy. This is the Freccia. It has a spike, fire and forget, ATGMs. These are quite spicy. Quite spicy. 10 warheads, so they should be able to deal with ERA quite effectively. They can lock onto and track targets autonomously. Let me quickly take this into a test drive, so I can show you the capabilities of this thing. You of course also have a 25mm gun with APFS, yes, but let's be honest. Who cares about that when you have spike missiles? Finally, yeah. Also, per voices in Italian.
Let's go. The Italian voice actor for the ships was had some vigor. Hopefully it's the same for the tanks as well. I've not really heard them yet.
Okay, so what you can do with these missiles, you have 2 tubes with 1 ATGM each. You do have reloads inside of the hull itself, so a total of 8 missiles, which you can use to basically get 8 kills with. What you can do is lock onto 1 target, and that stays locked. So no matter where I point my turret, within reason of course, if I go too far off, the missile will lose lock. But I can do fun stuff like lock onto 1 target, look at the other, fire a missile, lock and fire immediately, so I can essentially kill 2 targets in a very quick succession. There are some drawbacks to the spike missiles, as with the QN506, you cannot control the missile after launch, which means that if the enemy deploys a smoke screen, goes behind cover, or even if the missile decides to go for the third front of an Abrams, you won't get a kill. It is relatively easy to spoof or defeat that way. However, given that this is at a relatively low battle rating of 10.0 currently, and you don't face too many tanks with APS or strong ERA protection, or strong chemical protection really in general, this thing is going to be quite nice.
Yeah, I believe they always go for complete center mass. So on some stuff and some angles they can be a little bit inconsistent, but generally they're going to be pretty powerful. I think as well you do need a direct kind of line of sight from the optic, so you can't like sit behind a hill and then just like launch them over complete cover. So they are fallible in that way.
Good thing is you can fire them on the move, so if you want to you can lock onto a target, try and move a little bit closer to cover and then fire a missile. It will do that all very, very well. And something else, you can also use it against aircraft, technically speaking, but these missiles are quite slow, not very maneuverable, so it's very unlikely you're actually going to hit an aircraft that is even slightly maneuvering. Against helicopters these might be slightly better, but that is up for you to discover in the game once it releases. So yeah, Freccia, Spike HGMs, very nice, Italy, look forward to this. Also, very big wheels chassis.
I like how sort of it droops at the end.
I think this is based on the boxer chassis, but I'm not entirely sure. Of course, apart from that, you have a night vision thermal, that seems like first gen, not the best, and you have APFS, yes, for the 25mm gun. Alright.
Very nice.
Next up we have the French. Oh, wrong screen.
Another boy. Look at this as a house. It's an absolute house. I really like this. It's got a full ammo rack as well, ready rack rather, for the 155. France in Tier 5 has always been tiny. It's a tiny kind of area. Adding this, I think, is really, really good. It's interesting, plays differently, it's pretty unique, and it's pretty fun. I like these like giant HE cannons. So 7.5 second autoloader, not hugely dominant, but for what it is, it's pretty good. It's quite slow to react. Again, this is on an A screw spaded in terms of gun options anyway. Pretty slow to turn. You are huge and very, very weak, obviously, but as the rack is completely full, you can just fire and fire and fire and fire. Pretty nice. The armor, pretty poor as you'd expect. It is weaker than the AMX-30. It's only 30mm, so you're not quite as protected there either. But performance is pretty great. You have the standard HE and then you have the proximity as well. And it's just a nice, different thing to give France at this BR. I think it gives us something different. A complete difference to the others.
Quick question that I was going to make. How big is the first stage ammo rack?
It's, I believe, it's pretty much the whole thing. So it can fire and fire and fire, basically.
A 7.5 second reload on a gun that big is quite nice.
Yeah, it's a nice addition. Like, just add some more variety, I think. These guns, well, these tanks really, I like them. They play differently. A lot of tanks of this tier get kind of homogenous with how you use them. But things like this kind of stay unique. And I like that.
I gotta say, it looks amazing.
It does. It's just a house. I really like it. Big square. Big square. What more could you want?
Moving on to triangles from the squares, we have a new Mirage, the Mirage 2005F, which can still be used in air combat, but will bring to France a better aircraft for a ground attack. Now, what I've currently loaded are Snake Eye parachute bombs, which I will actually launch right now. So let me quickly go into continuous mode and look at us. I think those are my favorite out of the high drag bombs, just because they don't have that really obnoxious parachute.
They look cool, yeah.
They look very, very nice. The deployment animation is also very nice. You can check that in the replay.
It's very pretty.
They should fall a little bit faster than the parachute bombs. But something that I actually was quite surprised to see is this big thing in the middle. Now, up until now, we had the choice of either guided missiles or guided bombs, each with their own benefits and drawbacks. Guided missiles tend to have much longer range and generally are a bit more maneuverable, so they can attack moving targets a bit more effectively, but they don't quite have the punch, they don't quite have the explosive radius to deal with multiple enemies effectively. Guided bombs did provide a bigger explosion radius and bigger punch, but they couldn't really travel all that far. They were basically completely reliant on inertia. Introducing the new PGM bombs. There are two versions, a 500 kilogram version and a 2,000 pound version, 500 pound version and a 2,000 pound version. These are a little bit of a hybrid. They pack the explosive power of a bomb, but have a little rocket booster to sustain the speed that they're dropping at. They don't go too fast, so you still need to lob them a little bit. You still need to have the speed of your own aircraft to launch them very far. But they can go very, very, very far. I've been able to get hits from up to 10 kilometers away. So let's do a lock. I'm just going to lob the bomb up. And as you can see, it deploys a booster. The bomb is also TV guided, not laser guided. Okay, that was a little bit too far, lost the track. It is TV guided, which means you can actually just fire and forget these. You don't need to keep a laser lock on the target, which brings benefits and drawbacks. The benefit, of course, is that as soon as you launch it, you can run away, perform evasive maneuvers, especially in the case that there are enemy SPA in the area. But it also means that you cannot correct the course of the bomb after it is launched. And TV-guided munitions tend to have a tendency to lock onto dead tanks if the original target that you were firing at drives past one. However, since you can load them quite far...
Will the dev stream curse happen again?
It'll be fine. Eventually it'll work. Eventually. You have this targeting pod as well, which does provide you thermal vision quite clearly. Very nice. I'm going to lock onto this target again. You cannot drop this bomb if you're going supersonic, so I need to slow down a little bit here. Okay, drop, and let's hope that this time it works.
I have faith.
It also has quite a big trail, so the enemy will see it coming. The booster does not burn forever, so at extremely long ranges it will eventually burn out and will lose the trail. But as you can see, it can be a very effective tool for dealing, especially with SPAA. The blast radius on the bomb should be enough to deal heavy damage or outright kill multiple SPA that are sitting in spawn if they are close enough together. This is a very, very, very big boom with a relatively long range, and you can carry up to 3 of them. 1 PGM 2000 on the central line and 2 PGM 500s on the wing pylons. Very, very nice. Of course, overall, the actors are also quite nice. You can still take out Magic 2s and Super 530Ds and Super 530Fs, the radar missiles which you can find on the other Mirages, but generally speaking, it is really more intended for ground attack, and quite effective as well. And if you're not a fan of the PGM 2000, given, for example, they may not work at nighttime, given that the TV tracker needs light to be able to find the enemy tank, you can also bring either paveways or this BGL. Both are laser-guided bombs, which you can use more effectively and determine the course after you drop the bomb. Alright. Next up, we have... Ooh. Oh, I know you're going to like this one, Tom.
I like... bombers. What can I say, man? I'm really bored. No, Lancaster MR7, I believe that's Marine Recon or Marine Reconnaissance, some version of that. It's nice. It's not quite as good as the British one. You can see it lacks the top turret, the dorsal turret there. So it's only got the 50 in the back and the 7s in the front. It also doesn't get the huge bombs in standard load. It's a nice little bomber to give to France. It does have a radar. I believe this is just for ships or it's like anti-submarine. I think this is roughly what this Lancaster was for, but not functional at least right now. But yeah, I like the camo, of course. Another little Lancaster. You can't really hate that in any capacity. Not too much to say. Obviously, you know what this is. It's a nice addition for France as well. And we also have a few French ships we can show you. The cool stuff, like the bigger stuff, not quite ready yet. Don't worry, they're coming. I'll briefly look over these. I'm not too familiar with the French ships, but they do have very nice guns. The guns are quite powerful. We have a few here we can briefly look through. Don't spend too much time as, well, we have other things to show still, and we are loosely running out of time. But they're nice. The guns are good. In terms of the power they have. So I think I've been playing a lot of the Italian destroyers and cruisers, and the guns have always let me down on those. Not so great. It's a nice little breath of fresh air for these. They're very nice. They just look nice as well. I don't know, there's something about the French ships I just like the look of. That's why I really know, not knowing too much about them. So we have some cruisers, have some destroyers to look at. The Malan as well. Don't Google that on company Wi-Fi. I took one for the team there the other week. They're very, very pretty. Very pretty ships.
Now, I believe these will be launching in closed beta tests, so they will not be available immediately for everyone. You can either get into the CBT by buying one of the premium versions of the French ships, which we already have, for example, launched in the last update, or by by completing missions, which will then give you access to the early testing of the tech tree. Ash, can you quickly show the tech tree as it currently stands?
I can. This is the preliminary, what we have already. Obviously it looks quite underwhelming, but there are quite a few more ships coming. Some very pretty ships coming as well. So this is what we have so far. Standard stuff, it's pretty, like, as you get really for the start of the tree. But don't worry, a lot more is coming for the French naval tree.
Speaking of naval, we have a new map. I'm currently setting out the Colbert, which is the top battleship for the French. And you may notice there's something a little bit angry with me. This is the new map, and it also features a new feature, fire bases, which will engage you, and that's a very big turret, if you get too close. Now what you can do is destroy them, either by firing at them with your main cannons, or aircraft as well can bomb the targets, probably a little more effectively than battleships can, to disable them, gain missions or gain score for yourself, and of course help out your team, because as long as those fire bases are active, you can't really get too close. You can't get onto that half of the map because they will absolutely wreck you.
Yeah, it's a really nice kind of dynamic map-based objective to focus on. And especially if you're just starting out as well, like you don't have your accuracy upgrades yet, it's a nice way to get a bit of score, get some points to upgrade your ships, because they are a little bit easier to take out than destroyers and regular ships. So it's really nice. It's a good step, I think. Kind of looking forward to seeing how this plays.
This is a very icy map. You do have some landmasses here to provide you cover as you approach the capture points. And of course, as I mentioned, for aircraft, this should actually be quite nice, because aircraft up until now always had the problem in naval that they would get immediately lasered by the AI gunners on ships and couldn't really do anything too effectively. But now with these firing bases, they actually have an objective they can deal with and help out the team quite effectively. Okay, next up, let's go to Sweden. Not too much really to cover there. We have the new AJS 37, which is a slight upgrade over the previous AJ 37. Is it that it's called? Yep. Right after it in the tech tree. This will essentially bring you more Mavericks. You can carry up to 4 of the RB75s, which are roughly equivalent to the AGM-65 Maverick air-to-ground missile. One thing to keep in mind, currently at least, the aircraft does not have internal flares. You only have these flare pods, which do occupy one of the slots for the RB75, which means that if you want to bring flares, you can only bring 2 of the RB75s. Alternatively, you can bring out the RB24J, up to 6 of them. These are roughly equivalent to the AIM-9J, so rear aspect only, or the RB74, which are all aspect and roughly equivalent to the AIM-4, to the AIM-9L, but you can only bring 4 of them. You also have the CV90-30 Fin. This is a Finnish version of the CV90 chassis with a 30mm Bushmaster cannon. This has APFSDS with up to 116mm of penetration, but no ATGMs. The thermal device should be quite advanced, so you can definitely use your scouting ability to help out your team, but I wouldn't recommend going into head-on combat with enemy tanks. The gun just doesn't really have enough penetration for that. Also, I'm so happy, we have had a Sherman in every single tech tree, except for the Swedish, up until now.
Another Sherman! I love Shermans, they're my favorite vehicle type. This one looks kind of cursed though. It doesn't have the MG port, doesn't have a 50 cal, it's like the liminal space equivalent of the Sherman, it's like slightly off. But it's nice, I didn't actually know Sweden used this one. I thought they just had a 105 and a Firefly, but apparently they had a few more Shermans they tested as well. Nice little premium, get the nice skins on it as well, always a positive. Pretty good idea for a premium really, it bolsters that lineup, and now you can have a T-34, a Panzer IV and a Sherman in one lineup, which is quite nuts. That's going to be pretty fun. Yeah, a nice little premium tier 3 as well for the Sherman, so that's a nice bonus. You know what this is, there's not really too much to say about it, but it's a unique model. Have no frontal weak spots on the hull whatsoever. Turret is still pretty strong, it's one of the stronger versions of the turret. You do have the little weak spot here. If people know about it, then it doesn't work too well against the rest of your armor, but pretty nice Sherman, unique model. I like it. Love me Shermans, simple as.
And finally we have Israel as well.
We do. I can show you this. The Hydropod Magak. I don't really think the rockets are that usable, at least directly. We'll have a brief little look.
They fire a little bit higher than expected.
They do, yeah. I'm using the crossed mouse that doesn't have the keybind for the rocket.
Oh, that's not ideal.
No.
Anyway, so they are aimed upwards. So it's like if you've used the LAVAD, the Hydropod on that, they do have a little arc to them. These have a very high arc.
Oh wait, hold on.
I will just set the key for it. Actually, as you can see in here, it's a bit more visibly visible for which keys you have, basically, for setting stuff. That's the change as well, which is kind of nice. Makes it a little bit more visual. I think it's special guns, isn't it? I'll put that on space. Let's do that. Is this right? Yes, it is. Okay. So as you can see, these do aim very, very high. I don't know if they're able to be aimed. I imagine they're probably not. So it's either only really good for aiming at stuff very, very far away, or you need to kind of get used to doing some kind of crusty stuff with your aiming to hit stuff. It's kind of difficult, but it's a nice, unique vehicle. It's something just interesting, I guess, for Israel overall. Nice modification. I mean, they have a lot of interesting modifications of stuff, and this is definitely one of those. So it's a nice vehicle to have. It's folded as well. So it's just something else to have along the tree, like kind of gimmicky. But when you land something with those missiles like lander here, it's going to be nice. I'm going to see if you can shotgun stuff, like how easy that is, the aiming.
The rockets are quite high, so I'm pretty sure it's just going to fire over that RT1. Maybe?
Let's see when it reloads. No, you can.
Okay, they actually have decent suppression. That's
Yeah.
not bad.
Annoyingly though, you can't both functionally use the gun and the pods at the same time, which is a bit annoying, but yeah, that's going to take some getting used to. That really is going to take some getting used to, but
Thankfully, you do have a lot of rockets there, huh?
yeah, that's going to be something. At least it's, you know, interesting. Kind of works. You just got to get used to it. It's going to be a very annoying vehicle in the right situations, I guess.
Alright, and that is it for the vehicles, but as promised, let's quickly do a simulation of what an Su-39 may look like in a regular match. On this particular Su-39 right now, I have two R60Ms, I have the rocket pods, I have 16 Vickers,
Alright,
I have the
well,
radar
pretty
pods
much
that
it
should
for
be able
the
to
vehicle.
detect moving ground targets, and two
I'm gonna end the stream. I will see you
KH-29Cs, the
guys
TV
later.
version. As you can see, you have a lot of options here for ordnance. You can